I have watched a number of discombobulating videos lately on the subject of patriotism, so I thought I would just discuss briefly my own interpretations. First, let me say I believe there exists in our founding documents an ultimate purpose, a destiny, if you will, that is to be fulfilled. I believe that a multitude of idealists with agendas counter to this American dream have held our nation's offices of power and have interpreted and legislated laws to the same effect. There are a few who still believe in a skeletal constitutional government, and when I speak of patriotism, these are the men and women I include. It is patriotism that brings together these people and acts as catalyst for change. And by that I mean constitutional conservative change. Now you may argue, and correctly so, that a totalitarianism too accomplishes nothing without the consent, voluntary or compulsory, of the people subjected to cooperation. But such comparisons are nothing more than embarrassingly doltish sensationalism employed by dissenters. And to be quite forthright, when it comes to such blatantly erroneous logic, I am not sure which disgusts me more, the manipulators or the manipulated. At this point, I'm sure the manipulated are surely awaiting clarification. Patriotism is an unconditional loyalty and commitment to the perseverance of our nation's values. By unconditional, I in no way imply obtuse meekness. Rather, by unconditional, I mean simply unwavering, so long as the values themselves are not abandoned. It is possible to be a nationalistic American and still despise our current state of affairs. A series of actions or even atrocities counter to our values does not alter the intrinsic morality or utility of said values. But anarchists will argue even here, from what authority are these values levied? And to ask such a question states obviously they haven't read our founding documents. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are not values granted us by our government. The government is not the authority from which these values were derived, but rather the protection of these values. I wishfully believe that any educated American understands this truth, however inconvenient to their anti-American cause, that it is our Creator who endowed upon us these rights. And you feel free to make of Creator what you will. To even the atheist, this should imply that the aforementioned rights, or values, if you will, are absolutes, similar to physical laws, yet thus far not as veritably demonstrable. But I will save constitutionalism for another time. And so returning to the unconditional qualities of patriotism, so long as the foundational values remain, so will the commitment and loyalty of the patriot. If not, then our patriot is the entity lacking in convictive principle, not our nation. Nothing abstruse about it, no vague and ambiguous, esoteric and off-target pseudo-intellectual parlor games to be played out in some laughable high-noon debate of Utopia. It's right there in front of you. Just be careful not to confuse the classical senses of the language with the oscillating suggestions and hollowness of contemporary parlance. So if you detest life, if you abhor liberty, and if you find the pursuit of happiness a race not worth running, by all means, criticize the patriotic few. At least you know with some amount of clarity that which you do not believe in. I couldn't honestly care less, but I'd rather know what it is you do believe in. And yet, once again, I am also aware that the predictable simpletons of anarchy will believe I have just spun the wheels of deception here, and that I am guilty of hypocrisy myself. They will surely feel that I am either confusing patriotism with a skewed perspective of freedom, or that I am engaged in a more sinister plot to paint anarchists as an opposition to freedom. They are a helplessly presumptuous and utopian lot. But that is only because they despise statism while mistakenly assuming that nationalists are dependents without, it ostensibly seems, investing the time and energy necessary to properly scrutinize the necessity of government, however skeletal and constitutional, mind you, as millennia of history has shown us. And what have they to counter? We'll try not to laugh. But their dearest defense is that a lack of evidence is, in itself, evidence for the validity of anarchy. So to any anarchists who may or may not watch this video and demand a debate, please do not expect me to surrender my precious time, unless you bring something of substance. Until then, patriotism.